Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's Author Talk series brought to you by the Library Speakers Consortium. The Library Speakers Consortium is a partnership of more than 350 library systems across the United States, Canada, New Zealand, and Australia, with the goal of making Author Talks more accessible to communities of all sizes. I am Brandon Adler, your host and moderator in conversation with each of the acclaimed authors that you will hear from throughout our series. Today, we are so excited to welcome best-selling author Naomi Alderman to talk to us about her newest novel, The Future. Hi, Naomi.
Hello. It's lovely to be here.
Oh, lovely to have you here. Thank you so much. So I know that we're super excited to get started. Before we begin, I just want to pause for a couple seconds and let everyone kind of get that standard housekeeping information that keeps everything running smoothly. And then we'll get things rolling. We have compiled some questions that were pre-submitted with registration, but you can also submit questions during this live event. So you can do that by clicking the questions button that's just below the live stream video and submit your question at any time. Keep in mind, there are quite a few of you tuning in today, so we'll get to as many questions as we can during the hour. Now, to formally introduce our guest for today. Naomi Alderman is the best-selling author of The Power, which won the Women's Prize for Fiction and was chosen as a Book of the Year by the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Los Angeles Times, and was recommended as a Book of the Year by both Barack Obama and Bill Gates. As a novelist, Alderman has been mentored by Margaret Atwood via the Rolex Arts Initiative. She is a fellow of the Royal Society of Literature, and her work has been translated into more than 35 languages. It's pretty phenomenal. Welcome again. How are you today?
I'm okay, thank you. I have a slight sore shoulder from all the books I've been signing, which that's a pretty nice reason to have a slight sore shoulder. Yeah.
It is a pretty nice reason, and it's pretty lucky that you won't have to sign any books today.
I mean, I would like to thank everybody who's come here today. You can sign your book and consider that I signed it for you, because even if you had come to a live event, I would have been saying, I'm sorry, I can't, my shoulder.
Oh no.
So you can just imagine that I told you to sign it right now.
How many books does it take to injure a shoulder?
I think it's been about 8,000.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Whoa.
So
Yeah.
that's just a lot of, and when you think about it, you do write with your shoulder rather than with your hand. Like, that's the part that sort of keeps moving. I have to stop doing that now.
Is this your right shoulder slightly bigger than the left?
I
So it
mean,
gets so much work.
certainly, like, if you see me sort of doing that at any point, it's not that I'm bored. It's just that it's hurting a bit, but it's all fine. I have
Well,
a physical therapist who's looked at it.
that's
It's
good.
all okay.
That's good. We don't want you to be in pain.
No.
Okay, so let's start off with, I can't get over like the Bill Gates comment in your bio, and then relating it to The Future, your new book, and wondering if Bill Gates would also recommend The Future as the best book of the year, or if he would see himself kind of like maybe thinly veiled in some of the characters.
I mean, I have to, okay. So first of all, when I saw that Bill Gates had liked my book, I thought, okay, well, maybe I've got their attention then. Maybe I can like say some things and some of these people will hear. But also, like, I very specifically did not go and research the actual lives of any of these technology billionaires. I did not want to be reproducing that. The characters are made up, but the companies are very similar to real companies. So there are 3 companies in the novel. There's Anvil, which is a company that sends you stuff. There's Fantail, which is a social media company, and there's Medlar, which is the name of a kind of fruit, which is a hardware, like, sells computers company. So there are at least 2 companies in the world that do all of those things. But definitely you can go, I feel like I have a strong suspicion I know what those companies are, and certainly I have some comments to make about them.
Yeah, some very fair comments. I think that we all kind of need to reflect on. I guess to back up just a moment before we really dive into The Future, can you give everyone a brief introduction to The Future? Because I know a lot of people join not having had read it yet.
Sure, yeah. probably people are like waiting for it at the library, which I have certainly many times been in that position with the book. So the novel is, I won't do any spoilers, okay, so don't worry.
No spoilers.
Because it was only published 3 weeks ago, less, I think. So the novel opens, this is not a spoiler, with 3 technology billionaires getting an alert from their automated prediction software to say, this is it, guys. The apocalypse is coming. Something has gone very badly wrong. You've got to get into your private aircraft and go to your secure survival bunkers. The secure survival bunkers are a real thing that I read about. Well, you can Google it actually. I read a piece in the New Yorker in 2017 about this. There's now a whole book by Douglas Rushkoff called "Survival of the Richest," and so then the novel flashes back to find out how we got into this situation in the first place. It follows both the billionaires, but also a group of their assistants, estranged wives, children in Silicon Valley who are watching what they're up to and are planning a sort of heist to steal a lot of their money. So and to see if they can use that for something better. So it's really, the novel is like a race between, can this oddball group manage to repurpose the wealth of these companies before they destroy the whole planet? And you'll find out if you read the book.
You will. You will indeed. So Molly is saying, I have read The Power as well as watching the series, and I'm in awe of the depth and power of your vision. Was there something specific that triggered your writing of the future? What prompted your vision of this world? Was it that article that you read in the New Yorker?
I think it was certainly that article crystallized a bunch of things for me. So I've been working in technology also for the past, as I've been working on novels, I've also been writing games. So I make a game called Zombies Run, which, whenever I say this, is like one person in the audience. I'm imagining there's one person out there who's going, I know that game. So that is a fitness game which you play by going for a run or for a walk in the real world, and we do stories from the zombie apocalypse in your headphones to get you to go further and faster and to make the whole business of getting some exercise a bit less boring. That game it's been going for 12 or 13 years now.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, and we have 10 million players. It's been very successful. So I've been working in tech startups basically for as long as I've been writing novels. And I've seen the industry go from being, scrappy little industry that could, people determined to change the world, all the way over to, oh, now a lot of them seem to be evil. And so, having worked in that for many years, I had a lot of things to say about technology, and it was becoming increasingly urgent that I wanted to say them. And so I suppose the article in the New Yorker really made me go, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense about how people think in that world. It makes sense about what sort of startup mentality is, what people really mean when they say they're trying to change the world for the better. And it felt like it was just basing a novel around that felt like it would get at a lot of things that I wanted to say.
Okay. So thinking of your game, Zombies Run, how did that come about? So you've been a writer for radio, right? A producer for radio, and you helped write and produce your show, The Power. Where did games come in?
Okay, so I'll tell you. So I did my master's in creative writing in 2002, 2003. And then so it's 20 years ago. Wow. And so then when I was working on my first novel, because I didn't finish the whole novel, so in 2003, I was working on it, I heard about something called an alternate reality game, which is a game that sort of, you play it via looking for clues on the internet, and we also sold packs of quiz cards, puzzle cards. So I heard about this game, and honestly, it was the most ridiculous kind of coincidence, which boils down to a friend of a friend was looking for a games writer. And I heard about this thing that's like the top of my head blew off, and I went, "Oh, I have to work on that. I have to work on that." So I did an application, I got that job, and that was like 2004. I started working on Perplexity, and then I sold my first novel in 2005. So I had been working for a children's charity in the UK, and at the point that I started working on Perplexity, I was full time then working in games, working in writing anyway, writing games, writing my novel, and it sort of ratcheted up, one thing, then the next thing, then the next thing. So Perplexity came to an end in 2007, but Adrian Hon, who runs the games company Six to Start, and I had such a good time working on it together that we said we should make something else. And he said, let's make something that makes running more fun. And I had recently started running, and like our running group had a little slogan when we said, oh, we just need to run faster than the zombies. So I said, well, we should do something where you're chased by zombies. And that was 2011, and that thing is still going.
That's amazing. I love that story. So let's back up even further then, to like your journey to even becoming a writer.
So I guess I had written for my own pleasure for pretty much as long as I can remember. I have distinct memory of coming home from school and writing little poems just for my own pleasure. So you're probably a writer if you do that. And I tried to write a novel when I was 15, did not get very far. But I was really trying. I finished the whole draft of a bad novel when I was 19. And then I went off and got a proper job. I was working for a law firm for my sins, and I was living in Manhattan. The law firm sent me to Manhattan. I was living in Manhattan. I was there on 9/11. I watched the towers fall from my office window, and I thought, I bet there were people doing in that office building, in those buildings today, doing what I'm doing, which is saying, I'll just do this job for another few years, and then I'll go and write that novel that I always meant to write. And then that's that. So I quit my job and I came back to the UK, and I applied to the Masters in Creative Writing at East Anglia, which is the big one in the UK. I came back to the UK because I didn't have to have health insurance if I lived in the UK. And I started my novel working on that course. And I had by that point some little signs that I was doing okay. Like I won a prize whilst I was on the course. And I remember also like winning a couple of short story prizes or getting shortlisted and getting checks. And that was the first money that I had made out of my writing. That was very exciting. I bought a sofa and I thought, okay, I'm sitting on something that is built, that has been bought by my writing. That's quite exciting. And then I was working in games, and then I sold my first novel in 2005. And here I am, still apparently allowed to do this.
Yes, and we are so happy that you are. Omari is asking, when do you know that you found an idea worth spending time on?
Oh, good question. It's not actually easy, that question. Sometimes I'm like thinking now about, ideas that I'm working on right now. So with The Power, I was invited to apply for a mentorship, which turned out to be a mentorship with Margaret Atwood.
How amazing is that?
Amazing. And I thought, well, maybe I'll throw in this crazy idea that I had. Maybe that's, you're supposed to submit a project that you want to work on. And so I submitted this idea about women electrocuting people, and then Margaret Atwood picked that one. So I thought, well, I suppose I'm writing that one then. I think something that I've learned about myself over the years is the wackier the idea is, the better for me.
Okay.
So, I mean, women electrocuting people on the face of it is a bit wacky. A running game where you run away from zombies, it's kind of wacky. And I think I somehow my best work occurs in that place where a real wacky idea is treated with quite a lot of seriousness. I think I cannot bear things that are only serious, and
Mhm.
I also can't really bear things that are only light. I have to have that mixture of light and shade. So right now I'm working on a book about, so my mom died in March of this year, which
I'm
so it's been a
sorry.
very, yeah, thank you. It's been a very weird year.
Mhm.
She had a massive stroke on the day of the premiere of the Power TV, and then her funeral was on the day that the show was released.
Oh.
So that has just been a lot. And without really fully intending to, I'm working on a book right now about my mother's death, which is also a book about a strange new animal appearing in the United Kingdom.
Hmm.
That's what I have to do, apparently. I have to write about more than one thing at the same time in order to somehow hold my own interest and give myself scope. And so if I'm writing about, female empowerment, I'm also writing about electrocuting people. And if I'm writing about technology billionaires, I'm also writing a heist thriller romance.
Mhm.
And, I feel like readers these days, particularly, are choosing to read a book, not just over the other books, but over Netflix and over PlayStation and over social media, all these things. So if I'm trying to keep my own interest, then I'm also, I hope, keeping the reader's interest and keeping the pages turning, which I feel like is something that I somehow owe the readers, at least to try to do that.
Mhm. Okay. So in your, you said what you're working on now is kind of revolving around your mother's death and introducing a new odd animal to the UK. Are any of your other books, do you weave yourself into those as well?
I mean, I'm always in there to some extent. So, as people may know if they've Googled me, I grew up a very religious Orthodox Jew, and I'm not religious in that way anymore. The character of Martha in the future is somebody who has left a fundamentalist religion. She's left a cult that was run by her father. So I know some things about what it's like to be in a fundamentalist world and then decide to leave it. My leaving it wasn't quite as dramatic
Mhm.
as Martha leaving hers. I Yeah, I'm always looking for ways to talk about things that are important to me, and the things that are important to me come out of my own life. So, God knows, people who read The Power apparently ended up thinking that my dad was a gangster. My dad is not a gangster, but he is quite a fearlessly outspoken person. So my joke is, I don't know if this joke works in America, you have to tell me.
Okay.
My joke is that my dad's not a gangster, but he is gangster. Does that
Yeah,
work? Right.
that
Okay.
works.
All right.
It translates.
Good. Okay. So um yeah, I'm often finding things that I know are metaphors for parts of my own life. Um, yeah, I don't know. The story about the strange new animals has just turned up, and it seems to be want to be written every day, so I'm writing it. That's not always how I pick, but usually it's something that has come to feel quite insistent in some way.
Mhm. Yeah. Great. Well, thank you. So you brought up kind of the correlation a little bit between you and Martha. So are the Enochites in the future then, are they based on anything to do with how you grew up or any one specific religious sect or cult?
I mean, I've 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 tried these days to invent my own religions rather than going around criticizing other people's religions. Um, but I think certainly in the novel, you will see that there's quite a deep engagement with the text of the Old Testament, which certainly is something that I grew up with. I do also think that growing up an Orthodox Jew, I learned to do some things that maybe are slightly outside the norm, even if it's just we have 25 hours a day of no cell phones and not, using money. And so those things give a different quality to life. And I guess it's interesting. I'm much, much more peaceful now with how that has all played out in my life. And at the same time, there's always a kind of negotiation with it, a sort of feeling of, well, as they say, you can take the woman out of Orthodox Judaism, but you can't take Orthodox Judaism out of the woman. So there's something of that in everything I write.
Mm-hmm. So we have a couple of people asking about kind of your research process and how you take care of your own mental health, basically,
Oh my God.
during some of those things. And so Jenna and Stacy both are asking, or Jenna and Claire both are asking about research. And Jenna says, how do you keep yourself from falling into a state of despair when you spend so much time of your life researching, imagining, and writing about potentially dark subjects?
Okay. So first of all, when you write it down, it's on the page and then you don't have to think about it anymore.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So from that perspective, it's nicer writing it than just reading it. If I was sitting down reading every day about terrible atrocities and then had no outlet for that, that would be awful. But I put it into my work and then it's gone.
Okay.
There's a Paul Valery quote, which is something like, we only know things by what they discharge from themselves. We know flowers by their perfume, which they give off and don't hold on to it. So there's something, I think he's very right about writing. He says your genius is everything you are not, which is to say you put it on the page and then you can go around your life being fairly cheerful. I mean, genuinely, when I was writing The Power, I would sit, I'd write in the morning, I would sit in my kitchen and have my lunch with the radio on. So I would very frequently hear something on the radio about the situation of women in the world, and I would become wild with fury, and then I would come back to my desk and put it straight into the book, because that's a good place for it.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of my general mental health, I have a lot of therapy. I don't want to be anything but honest about that. I have been in psychotherapy for the past 20 years. It has not stopped me writing. In fact, it has helped me write. And if people are able, that is a good thing to do. And if not, there is, peer support and peer listening, which is certainly also useful. I take my mental health incredibly seriously. I come from a family of pretty smart people who don't always have the best mental health, and I've worked very hard on that. So yeah, I'm not just like, the novel, just writing novels doesn't do it. Also having a professional person and going, I'm taking care of this. I don't think I'm going to get to a point where I need to stop, or where I just stop and then I'm fine. I'm chill with it. I'm at peace with it.
Do you have to kind of compartmentalize or even segment your writing process and your writing schedule? So Laura and several others are asking about your writing process and even like your process for constructing kind of almost whole new worlds. I mean, you're using a lot of the real world and like kind of constructing on top of it these dystopian worlds. So can
Okay.
you talk a little bit about your process?
All right. So there are, we could spend a couple of hours on this and I would probably still have things to say. But in terms of writing, I try to write most days, but I don't get on my own back if I have when I'm working on something, my rule is that I write between 500 and 800 words a day, every day, including weekends. But I can do a day where I just write 100 words, or if it's a really bad day, just a sentence. But I can't do that more than 2 days in a row. So, if I'm sick, if I were actually, thank God I've never spent a night in hospital in my life for my own health. So that's a wonderful, lucky thing. But I guess if I were properly sick, then all that would go out the window. But what I find is, as long as I'm writing regularly, then it's as if there's a sort of like water dripping into a bowl inside my head. And then every morning I just empty the bowl out onto the page. And then it's full again the next morning. As long as I'm doing that really regularly, then it fills up again. In terms of my process, things work best for me if I'm writing as early as I can in the day, which includes sitting in bed and just getting started. That's not necessarily always possible. Life is complicated. But I try not to leave it until the late evening. At the same time, sometimes that happens and I'm not going to drive myself crazy over it. So my ideal writing day is get up or sit in bed, write a few hundred words, get up, have some coffee, write the rest of my few hundred words, go for a swim, like answer my email, and in the afternoon take meetings or whatever it is I need to do. That's ideal. When does the ideal day ever happen? In terms of researching, I'm always reading and learning. I have a book that I want to write, which is not about the strange animals, but is about the history of Jewish people in Europe. And I'm learning Yiddish right now. So I have a weekly class and I try and do a little bit of work on that every day because then the language stays in your mind. I'm doing a master's in classics for fun because I'm a real nerd. And it's essential for me. I have to always have some education on the go. And that keeps the motor running. Like something goes in, something comes out. Then I'm fine.
I think that's you're probably, you're talking to the right crowd as far as people who support libraries and access to information. It's like we all
Right.
have to continuously learn.
Right. I love libraries. That's as long as I have a library card and a membership to a swimming pool, I'm happy. Like then everything is okay. Oh yeah, so you were also asking about how to construct these worlds. It's interesting. So the next book after this one, I know is going to be quite a different world to our world, or like a world with another big twist in it.
Okay.
So now I'm really noticing what it is that I do when I'm doing that, which is to say, even when I'm not writing, constantly as I'm scanning the world, watching a movie or reading a newspaper or listening to music, I think, well, how would this be different if that thing in the world were different? And you just have to do that for 3 years and then you're fine. Just constantly. Just absolutely, incessantly, insanely, constantly. Yeah.
Jen is asking, can you give an example of when you had to make a choice about a story element being completely congruent with your world lore, maybe that can be explained but aren't made explicit, versus relying on suspension of disbelief or a riveting story to have readers not question it?
I'm trying to think of a specific example of this. I mean, I guess in some ways, yeah. So in the future, there are these survival suits that the billionaires have, which will keep them alive in any kind of weird, strange, dangerous situation they might find themselves. Like, is that completely congruent with the world building? Like, I've never done anything that I feel like is outright contradictory. It's a bit of a stretch, but what I try to do is make it so fun that the reader goes, okay. And as a reader, I don't mind that. As a reader, I would rather that the author is doing something that is fun and unpredictable. There's a trade-off between unpredictable and congruent. So if you've explained everything right at the start, then you can't surprise the reader, or it's harder to surprise the reader. So you need to be able to come up with things that are in keeping but still surprising, and that's the challenge. I mean, there was a funny one with the power where so I based this electricity on electric eels, and then when I went to research what electric eels did, actually it's incredibly impressive, and we don't really know how a lot of it works. And for example, they do seem to be able to like control the prey fish's brainwaves to make the fish swim towards them, not away from them.
Well,
So there was a question of how much of that I would put in. And I put in some, but I said that only a few women could do it. And that felt like, if you were to go and research electric eels, you would say to me, how is this okay, Naomi, that you haven't given this to everybody? I'm like, yeah, but it feels like then my metaphor is mucked up. So I can't make that be true of all the women, because men can't mind control people right now. So what you try to do, or what I try to do, is to put myself into the mind of the reader and go, would I enjoy this? Would I buy it? Would I enjoy it enough that I bought it? I mean, like, believed in it. And then you take a guess.
well, I think that that's one of the things that you did with the future, is that it seemed like it could be something that was on the brink of happening.
Right.
So you,
Right. Nothing in there is like so advanced that it's magic. There's not like telepathy in there. So yeah, I do try to keep. It's true. I do have a sense of what is stretching it a little bit and what would be snapping it. And I never ever want to snap it.
so I get focusing on the future then, the future, the novel, and I suppose the future. Um, you the book is thematically primarily about technology, but that's not really all that's going on in the book. It's not all that you're giving us. You kind of have several different plot structures in the future, which I think kind of goes to what you were talking about earlier with you can't have dark, you can't have just dark, and you can't have just light.
Mm-hmm.
You have to kind of interweave them. So can you talk about the plot structures that you have
I
going on in
can.
the future?
Yes, I've got 3 different plots going on there. Something for everybody. I've got there's a heist, which is the sort of main um the back engine of the novel. So when you have read the whole novel and you come to think back on it, you'll go, "Oh yeah, that was a heist." And I think probably at moments in the novel you will totally forget that I said that, because it will seem to be something else, and I find that delightful. There's also a noirish mystery in which a young journalist who is working on the apocalypse beat. She reviews technological items that will keep you alive during the apocalypse. So she stumbles into a plan that is much above her pay grade, and her story opens quite early on in the book, where she is chased by an assassin through a mall in Singapore, and then rescued by a piece of technology that she didn't know that she had with her, and who has given it to her and why. And there's also a love story. So Zhen, the journalist, and Martha, the executive assistant to the head of the social media company, meet quite early on, and they just fall for each other, as people sometimes do. And this is incredibly inconvenient, because Martha is planning a heist and Zhen is a journalist. And if you're planning a heist, you should not fall in love with a journalist. So,
No.
So, yeah, I guess I wanted to see if I could do all those things, and apparently I have.
Yeah.
And yeah, at the end, it all makes sense. But that was quite a lot of like sitting down with my editor and going, okay, how do we make this plot point come out? How do we make sure that this makes sense? But at the end, it does all make sense.
So not only do you introduce us or kind of immerse us into all of this technology, but you also, and maybe this is where some of your classics training comes in, you also introduce us to Greek references, indigenous knowledge, but the Bible a lot.
Yeah.
And the story of Lot and his family is pretty central throughout the book. And
Hmm.
you even in the Power, you talk about the Book of Eve and all of that. So it's kind of like a central theme between the last two books. So why was the story of Lot in this instance, of Lot and his family, so central to the book?
All right. So yes, I do write a lot about the Bible, or at least I put a lot of Bible in. If you can read the Bible in the original Hebrew, I feel like you want to use that skill whenever you can, which I can,
That's
obviously.
true. You should, yeah,
Yeah.
you should definitely practice,
Yeah.
flex that muscle.
Yeah. And um, you know, that's probably the most influential book ever published in the history of the world.
Yeah.
Probably.
Mhm.
So that feels like that's okay. To rely on it sometimes. Um, in terms of Lot, so when I heard about these billionaires building their bunkers and thinking they could escape, being that I'm very literate in the Bible, my thoughts immediately went to Lot. Now, people will have heard the story of Lot's wife, who is told to look back. They're fleeing this city that the Lord is destroying. And Lot's wife's told not to look back, and she looks back and she turns into a pillar of salt. But there is a pre that and a post that in the story. And Lot is somebody who comes from a civilization where people are not being kind to one another. He feels like he's above it all. He is very powerful in the sense that apparently he's Abraham's nephew, and apparently Abraham is mates with God, which is, helpful.
Yeah.
And Lot believes that he and his family can just escape and then everything will be fine without trying to save the people around him, without trying to help, that the whole of his civilization can be destroyed and he's going to be okay. And it does not work out that way for him.
Mhm.
And this felt like a very important thing to reflect on when thinking about these billionaires believing that they can go to a bunker and just wait there while the rest of us get destroyed. Because, wherever you go, there you are. And if you were the kind of selfish, I don't know how we feel about swearing, selfish so and so, um, who believed that you could just get your family out and you'd be all right, then are you going to be the kind of person who can create a lovely new society? Probably no.
Mhm.
Actually, your strength and your safety lie in the community around you, in the people who love and trust you, and the people who you love and trust. And the fantasy that you can somehow buy your way out of the need for genuine human relationships is hollow ashes.
Mhm.
So that's the story of Lot. I'm not gonna spoil the whole story here for people who don't know it, but anybody who is listening and does know the story of Lot will know exactly what I'm talking about.
Mhm.
It's I mean, you know, I think in some ways we have ceded as readers, maybe we've ceded the Bible to religious people, and you only really get a good education in it if you go to religious school. But actually, that's as much part of our literary heritage as Homer and Shakespeare, and deserves us to have some literacy in it. These were stories written by people who really did know, people who had had their cities destroyed, and people who lived in caves. So we can probably take some useful wisdom from them.
Mhm. I agree. Something that you mentioned about community and still kind of staying together and helping one another in society makes me think of who we would think of as kind of survivalists and preppers today, and they're typically always doing things solo and trying to
Right.
keep people out. So, do
I
you do you think that we're kind of on the brink of the prediction for the billionaires, but as a society as a whole, because it seems like people think that being alone is the way to go.
I mean, look, what we're talking about here is a kind of American rugged individualism.
Mm,
And, there's a How the West Was Won type quality to it,
yeah.
which, as we know, How the West Was Won was extremely problematic.
Yes.
And, I spent my past 12 years with my head half in zombie stories. And so I've become and my players are wonderful and I love them. They're just a really, really great group. Um, and I've become aware of what it is that zombie stories, which are still going, right? There's still a lot of zombie
Yeah.
stories out there, what they're doing and why people are interested in them. So the traditional American zombie story is a story about a single guy with a shotgun who can somehow fend off the hordes. And this fantasy is fascist. She says, resettling herself in her chair. Um, this is, I understand it. It's also a fantasy that has to do with the kind of consumer capitalism that we're living in,
Mm,
where all you need is yourself. Just work hard, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, etc.,
sure.
etc. Now, somebody wrote about this book that is anti-capitalist. I don't think it is anti-capitalist. I actually like a lot of the things that capitalism gives me, but I think if we live within a system, we have to be willing to look at the problems as well as the good things. And one of the problems is we're encouraged to define ourselves according to what things we buy, how much money we make, and to believe that we can substitute wealth for community, and you can't.
Mhm.
um, and it becomes very hollow very quickly. So yeah, I think um this these thoughts about what kind of society we live in, um I think, I don't know, I feel like that's worth having. I feel like it's a conversation worth having, worth understanding why it is that we're living the way we are. And um yeah, in terms of the zombie fantasies, Zombies Run is a communitarian, like left-wingy apocalypse, which is to say, I think people like my game because um, I stand up very strongly in that for the actual historical realities of human beings, which is that we survived by wandering around in groups of about 150 people and caring for each other, and not everybody had to be good at everything. And somebody's good at making ropes and somebody else is good at making the pots, and someone else is brilliant at hunting the deer, and we need all those people. So yeah, I think that's it's a strange fantasy, the I can do it all myself. It's also really, like, that's why we're also depressed and lonely.
Mhm. I agree.
So
And
yeah,
it's
it's interesting. You can, like, I was watching a movie from the 1940s today, and it's really interesting watching old movies and noticing how much time people spent with other people compared to even like movies today will show people on their phones rather than necessarily always spending time with other people. I feel like I don't know, is the society collapsing? I hope not. But if it does collapse, it'll be because of that. Because we all stopped believing in other people and started believing in machines instead.
Mhm. John is asking, based on especially everything that we've just talked about, how it feels like the future is happening in present day. Did you write this as a warning?
Yeah. That's a short answer. I did. I think at least partly I did. Um, I also, I'm not going to spoil it, but the book has something of an optimistic ending, which I sort of decided on just because I thought, God, it's so easy to point out the problems and give a warning. And something that readers had said to me after The Power was like, but what's the solution? And I thought, well, I'm just a novelist, but I can at least suggest some solutions. And maybe that's a useful thing for a novelist to do every once in a while, is not to go, things are definitely going to go from bad to worse. Occasionally, human beings manage to fix stuff. We do have everything we need to fix it.
Yeah, we have the capability to fix
We
it.
do. And I think if you want a little optimism with your warning, it is the following. I have not read or seen this discussed in these terms anywhere, but in the past 3.5 years, human beings have done something unprecedented, I think, not just for human beings, but for any other species on this planet, which is we have acted in concert as a species to defend against a species-wide threat, which was a global pandemic. Not everybody did it. Some people shouted about it. Some people had conspiracy theories about it. But overall, as a species, we managed to do enough that our civilizations were not destroyed by a global pandemic. And the rate of death was much lower than it could have been if we hadn't done those things.
Mhm.
And I think we should take some real pride and sort of awe at that, to say, look, there's some chance we can become a different kind of species than this planet has ever seen before, which is to say we are a species that can work together across the whole planet on global problems.
Mhm.
So I find that very hopeful. I think I'm the only one, but I'm sharing it with you now in case you'd
Yeah,
like to give some hope.
I find that hopeful now too. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Pam is asking a question about the audiobook for the novel.
Mm.
Um, Pam says, "Can you talk about the audiobook for this novel? Do you listen to your own audiobooks? How do you think the reader experiences the novel differently when listening?"
Right. So I haven't listened to all of this one, but I do listen to my own audiobooks, and I listen to a lot of audiobooks. I was a member of Audible before it got bought by Amazon. I think I joined in like 2004, maybe something like that, really early. And before that, I was listening to books on tape, and before that, I was listening to my mom reading stories to me. So I love the experience of being read to. With this one, it's tricky, and I really did not want the audiobook listener to have a bad experience. There's forum posts in there from an online forum, and so we had some quite detailed discussions about how to do that in an audio format. And I suggested that we could sort of pretend it was a bit like Discord, and I've got there's my voice in there saying there's different little chimes, so it's like main post will sound like this, bing, and the note on the message will sound like this, bing. And so I really thought about it, and audiobook reading is completely valid. It's a valid way to read a book. Enjoy it. In
Mhm.
fact, it's probably more valid than reading with our eyes on a page in terms of how most people through history experience stories. If you really want a good time, by the way, and you know Bible stories, it's a great time, like, to tell a Bible story to somebody who hasn't heard it before out loud. The moment you start doing that, you go, "Oh, these stories are meant to be told and not written down. Clearly, someone wrote them down because they were in danger of being lost, but they come alive when you tell them to someone else." And it's fascinating to
That's
experience that.
fascinating. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like, when you're in a writing class, the instructor always says, "Read your work out loud before you
Yeah.
submit anything."
Yeah, I read everything to myself out loud. All of my books, I've read the whole thing out loud before it gets sent off to the printers, always. That's the best way to tell whether you've repeated yourself or whether the sentence sounds weird. It's just the best.
I can tell you from, reader experience, Pam, the novel it was different for me. The forum listening to the forum area, the forum sections on Audible, I was actually reading them wrong when I was reading it in print.
Huh!
And so I wasn't reading them in tandem, like, with the responses.
Ah,
I was reading the entire left side, and then I would go back and read the right side, and so when I started listening to it in audiobook format, I was like, "Oh, well, that makes way more sense."
I mean, there is no wrong. There's no wrong way to read a book. If what you want to do is skip over those sections, that's also okay. The
No,
book
those
belongs to
sections
the
are
reader.
super important.
Yeah, well, they are important, but yeah. But also, I don't want anybody beating themselves up for reading my book wrong.
Well, I suggest that if you're super into a book, you also have to drive somewhere, get in your car and start listening to it because there are so many things that you can pick up, even pronunciations of names that you maybe
Right.
didn't get when you were reading. Like that,
I love that.
yeah.
There are so many books where I've ended up buying the hard copy and the ebook and
Mhm,
the audiobook. That's
mhm,
true. Or at least I've like rented the audiobook from the library or something like that.
mhm.
I love that.
I'm almost always reading a book in more than one format.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So we have so many
So
great questions, everybody. Thank you so much. But we are running low on time. So for like the last 10 minutes, I'm just gonna ask
I'll
some
tell you
more.
what I'm gonna do, all right? So I have some questions here that we're not gonna get to. I'm just gonna save them, and maybe you can send me some extras. And every now and then, I'll put answers to some of them on my website. Okay?
Oh, that's amazing. Thank
Yeah,
you.
my pleasure. They're good questions.
They are really good questions. I want to ask Heather's question. Heather says, I teach at a high school and we study dystopian societies in regards to their elements of satire. I would be it would be great if you could mention and if you could maybe answer a few of these questions. Heather's first question is, do dystopian authors know that they are satirizing before they write, or do they discover it as they go?
I think I think I didn't necessarily discover it until after I'd written the second book that people called a satire. I was like, "Oh, is this a satire? I thought a satire was, like, heightened, and, this feels like ordinary level." Certainly, the with the power, the thing was that, there's nothing in that book that happens to men that hasn't happened to women at some point.
Mhm,
But on the other hand, I guess satire is using all sorts of different little tricks to get people to see the world that we live in a different way.
mhm.
And if so, that's something that I'm always interested in. That's what I'm thinking about all of the time. So, did I know I was writing satire? No, but in terms of what that turns out to be, that's I'm just continually fascinated by it.
Well, this is perfect then for Andrea's question. She says, your last two novels share a corrupting influence of power theme. Can
That's
you
true.
tell us more about why that interests you?
Yeah. Why does that interest me? I mean, you know, I grew up in this funny way, and when I was a young person, the system that I lived in told me that, for example, women's brains were not capable of understanding Talmud. And I could, this is like Jewish books of commentary, and I was able to like read the stuff and go, I think I've understood this. At which point, once you've seen like one crack in the wall of the powerful system around you, you just I mean, for me anyway, it became addictive to get out my little hammer and go tap, 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 tap. Is there a crack in here? My first degree was in philosophy, politics, and economics, which is the degree that you do in the UK if you want to then go and run the country, which I did not want to do. But certainly, it gave me a real taste for understanding how the big systems that operate our lives work. And I think, on some level, as a creative person, you end up gravitating towards the things that you can do that no one else seems to do. The reason is that it becomes increasingly frustrating when you read other people's work. You go, "But why is nobody talking about this? Why is no one seeing this?" And then after a period of time, you go, "Oh, that feeling is that I must write a novel feeling." When there's something that you feel like people ought to be talking about and they're not talking about it, then you've got to write about it. So there are people who write the most beautiful books exploring a person's character and personality in such depth and beauty and detail. And I love that. I love reading those things. At the same time, I feel like what's missing from that is that all of us are created in the space between our personality and the systems of power that we live in.
Mhm.
And you would be a different person if you had lived in 1720. Not just that you would describe yourself with different words, you'd be a different person. And I feel like this is so little discussed that it's really sort of drives me up the wall, actually. There's a real tendency these days even to write historical characters as if they are modern people. You remember Don Draper in Mad Men,
Yeah.
who is like somehow the modern person in Mad Men, who was going, yeah, I believe that women are as good as men at this and that. And you go, okay, but let's talk about who that person would be in that time and not written by us. Anyway, it's not that the show is bad. It's just that I feel like this is constantly grating on me in various ways, such that I have to write about it. That's a convoluted answer, but I hope it makes sense.
It's happening in TV a lot.
Yeah.
A lot, not just with Mad Men, just in general, making modern characters in even like Victorian era.
Right. I mean, I think the thing that is, something that is so difficult for most of us to really accept is that if we had lived 350 years ago, most of us would have been quite racist, sexist, and homophobic. That's tough. We don't want to believe that's true. And yet it's true. The people who lived 350 years ago weren't less smart than us
Mhm.
or more morally bankrupt somehow. They just lived in a different systems of power. So maybe there's something important there about understanding ourselves and how much or how little weight we can place on the idea of personality. It's not that I disagree that character exists. I think character is incredibly important. It's just that this is the one that I keep feeling like, oh God, I've got something else to say about that now. I
Yeah.
thought I'd said everything, but now I've got something else.
Well, speaking of characters and like character development, we have had a couple of people ask about that. Christine and Jessica both would like to know more about how you develop the backstories of all of your characters, because just like in The Power and The Future, your character list is so big, but they all have such rich and kind of deeply developed backstories.
Oh, thank you. I certainly learned a lot from making TV. When you go and do TV, you're working with a room full of writers who did not write your book, but are going to have to write your characters. And so they ask a lot of questions. What does this person do for a job? Where does this person's money come from? What were this person's parents like? Where did they grow up? What school did they go to? And you go, oh God, oh, I do know that, but I'm going to have to try and somehow make it up for you right now. So certainly that was a good training, and I think you can probably see it in the future, actually, that there's a lot of let's sketch this character in so that you can, as a reader, really understand them fairly quickly. Where do these people come from? Well, they're all, I'm going to give you a really ridiculous answer, but it's true. You should, anybody here who hasn't read George Saunders's book, A Swim in a Pond in the Rain, that is a very wonderful book, which is in a book form, a class that he has taught on the Russian short story, apparently for many years now. And it's wonderful. And he talks about a sort of inner compass of language, where as a writer, you put down a word and then you put down the word next to it and you go, okay, is that the right word? And if it's not, then you find a different one, but you keep doing that. The honest truth is, a lot of my characters turn up that way. I start writing, and then a sort of logic within the language tells me something about them. And then once I know something about them, then I can work out the rest. But there's a character in the novel, Zimri Nomik, who is the head of Anvil, which is a company that is not Amazon. And I started writing something about how as a child he had been, or as a teenager, he had been thrown out of a moving car by some of his classmates who were bullying him. I had no idea who that character was when I started writing that paragraph. But by the end of 2 or 3 paragraphs, I was like, oh, I know this person perfectly. And the honest answer is he emerged out of language. What can you do? What can I do with that? It's nonsense. It's the subconscious is what I'm talking about. You let your subconscious tell you, and it's got things to say.
Yeah. Wow. That's a lot to think about anyway, just in listening to yourself and trusting yourself to
Right.
come up with it.
Right. I mean, that it's. I'm not gonna, writing is not therapy. It is can be therapeutic, but it's not therapy. But it's certainly a prolonged practice of letting parts of yourself that are not necessarily rational speak through your fingers.
Mhm.
And I don't know, is it good for you? Probably, actually. It's not the only thing, but having done it for a long time now, that the thing I most love is to hurl myself into a story, like hurling myself into a pond in the rain, and
Mm.
then just relying on the water to bear my weight and going, it's going to be fine. I'm just going to find out what's in there today.
Yeah. All right. Well, we are going to conclude on that note.
This was so quick.
I know, I know. I warned you it was going to go so fast.
Yeah. So look, for people who want to find me, I do have a Twitter account. I am on Blue Sky. So I am going to see if I can get to answer some of these questions. And Brandon, if you can send me questions that you have that we didn't get to that you think will be good, I will try over the next, don't rely on it immediately, but over the next couple months, I'll try and get to them. Okay.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for that
Pleasure.
offer. And thank you so much for being here today. It's truly been a pleasure to talk to you for the last hour. Thank you,
Well, it's
truly.
been a joy. Thank you to everybody for your brilliant questions.
And
And enjoy the book when it comes up on the queue at the library.
I definitely want to echo that. Thank you for tuning in. Of course, without your support, the viewers, none of this would be possible anyway. So we thank you for choosing to spend your time with us. Below the live stream video, there is a Rate This Program tab. In that tab, you can also find a resources area, which contains links to Naomi's books. We look forward to seeing you all again in December when we chat with New York Times bestselling YA author Victoria Aveyard, and on December 5th, excuse me, and then again on December 12th in conversation with Stephanie Land. I am Brandon Adler. Thank you for joining us. Have a great day.